Hi, I'm Tom Bowling, and I want to share with you a beautiful bouquet concept from using our product from Pioneer Imports and Wholesale. And as you're looking here, this is called Renewing Retreat, and it's just a softness to it that just makes you go, ah. It's just that area of your life that you just kind of settle in, and you're not really, do I like that? Do I like that? Do I like that? This is grabbing my attention. This all just works well and blends so well together. But before we get going, I want to do a little introduction here to talk about a couple different stems and the construction of permanent materials. Most of what I tend to use is as a combination of what we call bush product, where it has multiple insertions or multiple placements on a single stem. And what I'll end up doing is cutting off however many that I need or afford or the recipe calls for, and then I'll use the others for an additional product composition as well. But you can see that I'll cut those off, keep the foliage onto it, and that way then I take the total cost of my material, divide it by however many placements are on the plug itself, and then that way I know how much each one of these costs me wholesale. And then I add my markup to that, and now I can sell individually, or I can price it as one bush and sell it that way. But the minute I start cutting pieces off, then I have to charge per head. That way I'm getting my money back on that. So we'll set that aside for just a minute. So that's a bush. Now a single stem is a little bit different. As you can see, the stem is elongated, and obviously it's got the wire through it, but we're paying for the fact that it is this look. So I could drop that multiples into a vase, have a beautiful collection that way. I don't have all those stems and stubs and wires hanging out. So, it's important to know when each one of these is important. Can I use a bush, which is generally at a lower price point, or do I need single stem? Or like I said before, I'm kind of going to end up using a combination of multiple pieces. And then of course we have the garland. My go-to is a garland. I love using garland. But I want to share an idea with you here. I'm going to take a wire, and you can use 24 is about an average gauge wire weight. That's how thick the wire is. The higher the number, the thinner the wire may be. So this is actually probably about a 26 gauge, which is fine for what I'm going to do. But if you needed something more substantial, either lower your wire gauge to a 24 or 22, or in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take several wires, 2 or 3 wires, put them together, and then tape them together to give me a little bit more strength. So again, not that you have to stock every gauge of wire, because that gets very expensive, but you can do what I'm doing here. And I have an 18 gauge, which is heavy, and it's harder to bend and harder to manipulate. So, but I do use 18 gauge wire. I'll use a 20, 22, that kind of mid-range. 24, it's a go-to. And then of course a lighter wire if you need that along the way. So I've covered that in tape. With my garland, I'm gonna separate, find the spine. I'm gonna take my wire here, bend it over, just about an inch or two, twist that into place. And then I'm gonna set that aside. And as you can see on my garland, I have a wire here, a wire here, a wire here, and a wire here. So I'm going to use those a little bit later to actually collar my bouquet. Again, prep work is part of the charging that I need to do. So it is important to know how much time-wise that you're doing, because the bottom line is you have to recoup your time, because if I wasn't doing this, I could be making something else and generating revenue that way as well. So you know, and I don't charge by my time. I'm not a lawyer, because, you know, the lawyers bill in 15-minute increments, or, you know, if they're really good, they go down to 7-minute increments, and every 7 minutes you get an assessment charge to this. What I do is I charge by the total cost of my materials. So we're going to talk about that, and you'll see a little video on pricing, and you can check that out as well. But it is important to know how to charge, whether it be fresh or whether it be permanent material, for what we're doing here. All right, so I've prepped a little bit, and when I do design work, floral foam, I'll take my foliage that I've manicured off, and I'll put that right back into. But in this case, being that I'm going to do a bouquet, I'm not going to do that. I want to keep these, not throwing them away, but we'll use them in another composition later. All right, so I think we're ready to begin. Let's take a look. I'm going to start by using some of the garland that I've cut pieces apart, added false stems to that. I'm going to create this nesting type of a feel. And the way that I do that is just gather these stems together, hold those in my hand, and I'm going to bend those out. I want to create, like I said, I'm going to use the term nest. I'm going to create this tangle of material, so when I insert my stems in here, it'll actually help hold those in place. So you could make whatever style of bouquet that you wanted to. You could make it a larger bouquet, more expressive, or you can, you know, do something a little smaller, a little bit more confined, as you're seeing me do. Now I've got those in place, but if I just leave them that way, they're going to swivel on me. So I'm going to secure those by using some bind wire. And bind wire is paper covered wire. It's a fairly low gauge wire, but it works out very well. And it comes in tan, and it comes in green, and a dark brown as well. So I'm creating this bind point, as you see right there, that holds all of this material together. Now I'm not going to go up and down and up and down the stem. I'm just going to leave it at that. And the two ends I am now going to twist together, and then do a technique that's called cranking, where I've got the two pieces of wire together in my hand, and I'm going to crank those two together, which means the binding point gets tighter. Remove the excess. This is great. This already looks good. It's successful. It tells a story. It almost reminds me of like a fern type of growth pattern. We call it radial design, where everything radiates from one central growth point. So I'm adding those in, and now I'm ready for some floral material. I told you I use a combination of both stem product and also bush product. So I'm going to dissect that one, bring that into my composition, open that up to get full value. That's just going to be a nuisance. So I'm going to cut that down, get rid of it early on. That's so much easier, not throwing it away. There are times that I'll be using that a little bit later. That olive, absolutely gorgeous. And you'll notice it becomes bigger, more expressive than the fern, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that the fern, that's as big as you can make your composition. In fact, it's the other way around. It's kind of the nest, or the center part of what we're doing here. Now, as you add more materials in, you can secure those in place either with tape. I'm a big bind wire person. I just think it's easy to use. It holds securely. I can twist that, crank, bend that down. I'm ready to move on. You can do these in stages if you like, you know, to make the base pretty much all the same, and then add different colors into it if you wanted to. Nothing says that it has to be a bridal bouquet, or a ceremonial bouquet like that, it could easily drop into a vase. Would be absolutely stunning that way. All right, dinner plate dahlia. Oh my gosh, how expressive is that dahlia? Now you'll notice that sometimes I'm going to pop this apart, and the maker of this is probably screaming. I'm going to take that apart, and especially if it's a little loose, just with shipping and handling, and sometimes it's in the design room. I'll put a little bit of adhesive or glue on here, and then reassemble that so it stays in place. There we go. The other adhesive that I will often use is the liquid floral adhesive that comes in a tube, just to adhere a little bit of that onto the stem. That way you don't ever have to worry about it coming out or coming apart. Okay, so let's put that back into, reassemble that, put that in place. And I'm thinking, all right, if this is my middle, I'm working off of that every time. The peonies, same color, but you can see this one's starting to swivel already. I don't want that swivel. So back to my bind wire. And you can build this in stages depending on the heaviness of the stem here. Bind wire is good, and my other go-to is also to use my anchor tape. Some people call it bulldog tape. There's a number of different what you call this, but it's really, really sticky. So I'm going to use that in addition to my bind wire. So I'm building this to become really secure, which is fantastic, super important. All right, so now let's take a look and see what we've done here. All right, I don't want this so tight that I can't manipulate it. I'll secure that a little bit stronger as we go through. Delphinium. When we're using spiked material, it's important that they're not aggressive. It's kind of like the finger, when you were a child and your parent would point the finger, or your school teacher, and do this. This is what your eye is doing. It's pointing at you. So I'm going to bend that point down just a little bit more. Grouping, color blocking. Grouping is placing light materials together in a growing area. Color blocking is doing just that, blocks of certain colors in place. Let's add a little bit more anchor tape. And I'm retaping, and I'll show you in just a second here. I'm going over and over and over the same tape, so the tape isn't crawling down the stem, it just stays at the same point in the composition. You can see here, all my tape is about a finger's width. So it doesn't need to come all the way down, all the way down, all the way down every time. That just takes too much material. All right, add a little bit more material here. Beautiful hydrangea. And this is probably, I'm going on 40 plus years in design. And when I was taught to design, I was taught if you put one product here, you mirror it to the opposite side. So that would mean a hydrangea here, a hydrangea here, a hydrangea here, a hydrangea here. That's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good way to get balance in your composition. But as you become more refined and more expressive in your design work, now all of a sudden you can play with balance, because that's important. Your design needs to be balanced, but you can see that I'm placing the different materials in to actually help balance. 1 large, 3 medium size, or 2 medium size and a small gives me the balance that I need and I'm trying to achieve here. A little bit more tape. Secure that in place. And I'm stretching, I'm pulling tight on that, putting tension on the tape, just not being loose about it. Adding that pressure of my hand, the heat of my hand actually helps the adhesive join and grab together. Now, let's add a little bit of texture in our composition here. This gorgeous heather. And right now, bridal bouquets are what I call very expressive. They're larger than life, which is a look. It's a trend that we're seeing. It's all right, but also too, they have that kind of a more natural look to them. So you're going to see grasses and some materials like that, textures coming out of the composition. Totally up to you how you build that. I'd like mine to be, the colors are a bit heavy already, so I don't want to add so much weight to that, because I have to keep in mind the person carrying it doesn't want to look like they're a weightlifter to be able to hold that bouquet. So I'm adding the fern that was a part of the heather into the composition as well. Have to say goodbye to my little greens here for now. They'll reappear at a later in a later composition. I'm going to secure that one more time before I show you a couple finish techniques. All right, let's make sure before we finish it off that things are and where they need to be. Yeah, I'm good. All right, so I showed you the garland earlier. Set that down where I put the wires onto it. And what I'm going to do here is actually collar the bouquet. Now those wires are coming down. So I'm wrapping the garland around the bouquet and securing it in place with those wires coming down. So it's just a great way to add impact, to finish off, to add texture into it. And really what this is doing is it's uniting all of my composition together. Well, you know what? I overestimated that one just a bit. So I can cut that. I don't need just because it's there. I just save that extra cost and that material, and I'll use that for another project. Or, as I look at this, I can insert that wire. I like the way that it spills out. Okay, so now I have all my stems, all my wires in place here. One last secure. And I tend to use the anchor tape versus the stem tape. This is crepe paper covered with wax. It's good, but it's not the strength that I need or want. This is fiber, it's cloth, and it has an adhesive on it. So that's why I'm using the anchor tape. It gives me the strength that I need. So when we get our composition all assembled, now we need to finish off the bottom. And there's a number of different ways that you can do this, and I've shared that in previous videos. But what I'm going to do is a technique that I learned early, many years ago in my floral career. It's called back taping. So I'm trimming up the stems to make sure it's all good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my anchor tape here. I'm going to go around the bouquet just like I've been doing, and then once I get back to the beginning, I'm just going to turn my tape around so now the sticky part is out. Let me show you what that looks like. You know what, I can easily, I do it on a couple bundles so it'll be easier for you to see. So if these are all your stems, I'm going to go and completely cover, go around as many times as I need to. Let me move this out of the way. And then when I get back, I'm going to flip that tape over, and now the sticky part comes out. And it's important that you touch every time the sticky part. You're going, Tom, why would you even begin to do something like that? Well, as you'll see, it really helps to hold the ribbon or whatever material treatment that you're going to use. It helps hold that in place. So this is all very, very sticky. And then when I get down to the bottom, then I'll turn it back one more time and go around. All right, so that's back taping. Hopefully you can see this. So I'm going to stretch, add my tape in place, and I'll show you in just a second. I'll hold it a little bit closer to the camera. So there's all my tape in place. I flip, and now I'm going to cover that handle with the glue part, the adhesive part, to the outside. So you can get an idea here. There's the sticky part. Of course, that sticky wants to grab everything off your design bench, so it's also a way to clean up your bench, but it wants to grab some of this material that's in there, so you got to be a little bit mindful. And you can see that I'm building that up, wrapping my stems. Bringing that all the way down to the very bottom of my bouquet. There's so many different ways to finish off a handle, and you'll find the one that's right or comfortable for you. Got a little wire there that I want to take care of. So now that I've got that sticky part out, I'm going to use my ribbon. And again, Pioneer Imports and Wholesale has so many wonderful ribbons. I tend to use a lot of sheer ribbon. Number one, just because I don't have to stock so many different ribbons as a shop owner. And number two, the sheer you can drop right into water if you're doing fresh work, and then it dries quickly. So I'm going to take my ribbon and bring it down the length of my stem, as you see me do right there. Now I've also left a little excess up at the top so I can tie the remainder into a knot. So as I wrap that ribbon, it's grabbing on to the sticky part of the tape. Years ago, and some of you may still have, we used to use cling. That floral clay, long before pan glue, before other of our materials were available, we would use cling, and that's that sticky green white adhesive. There's my ribbon. I'm going to tie that into a knot. Just a simple overhand knot is what I'm doing here. Double knot to make sure that it's not coming loose. And if you wanted to, you could add additional ribbon in. I'm going to take and make a loop just a single loop. Add that in. Tie that in place. What a great way to finish your bouquet work right there. Adding the ribbon treatments in, you can finish the edges, either at a fishtail or an angled look, depending on whatever look that you want to create here. What I don't want is a square cut or a raggy cut with a raggedy edge. I think we are ready to go down the aisle in style.